The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of pastries fresh out of the oven. The soft hum of conversation and the occasional clatter of dishes created a comforting rhythm in the small, bustling cafe. It was a place where people from all walks of life came together, young professionals tapping away on laptops, friends catching up over steaming cappuccinos, and the occasional lone visitor savoring a moment of solitude. The cafe, nestled in the heart of a diverse city, had become a community hub, a reflection of the vibrant mix of cultures and stories that defined the neighborhood. Among the patrons that morning was Margaret, a middle-aged woman with an air of entitlement that seemed to follow her wherever she went. Her expensive coat, designer bag, and sharp, scrutinizing gaze hinted at someone accustomed to getting her way. Margaret believed she understood the world and her place in it, a place where certain people served and others, like her, were served. She had a knack for spotting what she considered imperfections in service or surroundings, and she wasn't shy about pointing them out. Behind the counter, James, the cafe owner, moved with a calm efficiency that came from years of dedication. His journey hadn't been easy. He had faced countless challenges, including subtle prejudices and outright discrimination, as he worked to build the cafe into the thriving business it was today. With a kind smile and an unshakable confidence, James treated every customer with respect, no matter how they treated him. But that morning, James and Margaret's paths would cross in a way that no one in the cafe could have predicted. What happens when preconceived notions collide with unexpected truths? Sometimes, a single moment can reveal more about a person than a lifetime of words. The incident. The cafe was alive with energy that morning. The rich, earthy scent of coffee swirled through the air, blending with the sweet tang of freshly baked scones and croissants. Conversations rose and fell like a tide, punctuated by the occasional hiss of the espresso machine and the soft chime of the door opening to admit another customer. It was the morning rush, and the small cafe was at full capacity. Behind the counter, baristas moved with practiced ease, filling orders and balancing the steady stream of customers. The door swung open again, and in walked Margaret, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She exuded an air of authority, scanning the room with a critical eye as if assessing whether the establishment met her standards. Her tailored coat and leather handbag screamed sophistication, or at least her version of it. Her lips pursed slightly as she took in the diverse mix of patrons, her expression betraying a hint of disapproval. Near the counter, James, the cafe owner, was tidying up. A spill near the sugar station had caught his attention, and he carefully wiped it clean, his movements calm and purposeful. Margaret's gaze landed on him, and her eyebrows knit together. To her, he was just an employee, a background figure whose presence she deemed unimportant. Margaret stepped toward the counter, her demeanor stiff. She waited impatiently for her turn, tapping her manicured nails against the countertop. When James looked up and offered a polite, "Good morning. How can I help you today?" Her irritation became evident. She scoffed, glancing past him. "I'd prefer to be served by someone else," she said, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. A few heads turned, but Margaret seemed unfazed. James's expression remained composed. "I'd be happy to take your order," he replied evenly. Margaret's tone sharpened. "I said I'd rather be served by someone else. Isn't there anyone else here who can help me?" The cafe grew quieter as her words hung in the air. A customer nearby raised an eyebrow while another exchanged an uncomfortable glance with a barista. Margaret leaned in slightly, lowering her voice but not her disdain. "I don't want to deal with people like you. Just get someone else." James straightened, his calm demeanor unshaken, but the tension in the room was palpable. The hum of conversations had stilled, leaving only the quiet hum of the espresso machine to fill the awkward silence. The cafe, once filled with lively chatter and the soft clinking of coffee cups, now felt uncomfortably quiet. The tension from Margaret's words had rippled through the room, drawing the attention of staff and customers alike. People exchanged uneasy glances, some pretending not to notice while others struggled to decide whether to step in or stay silent. It was one of those moments where everyone knew something was wrong, yet no one wanted to be the first to act. Behind the counter, James stood tall, his calm composure a stark contrast to the hostility radiating from Margaret. With a polite smile, he spoke again, his voice steady. "Ma'am, I assure you I'm more than capable of assisting you. What can I get for you today?" Margaret's face flushed, her irritation boiling over. She crossed her arms, leaning forward slightly as if to emphasize her discontent. "I've already told you," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the room. "I don't want your help. You're ruining my experience here. Can't you see that?" The staff behind the counter exchanged nervous glances. A young barista, who had just finished frothing milk for a latte, looked to James, her concern evident. James gave her a slight nod, silently reassuring her to stay out of it. This wasn't the first time he'd faced such behavior, and he knew how to handle it, with grace and composure. Margaret, however, wasn't finished. She gestured dramatically around the cafe, drawing even more attention. "This is unacceptable. I come here for a pleasant experience, not to be treated like this." She glared at James as if he were the sole cause of her imagined grievances. "If you don't get someone else to serve me, I'll leave. And believe me, I won't be coming back." A murmur swept through the cafe as customers began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Some whispered to one another, while others frowned openly at Margaret's outburst. Near the counter, an older man shook his head in disapproval, while a younger woman muttered, "Unbelievable." Despite the growing attention, James remained calm. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he said gently, his voice unwavering. "But as the owner of this cafe, I'd be more than happy to ensure your order is taken care of. That's why I'm here, to make sure every customer has a good experience." The weight of his words caused an audible gasp from a customer near the counter. Margaret blinked, momentarily stunned, but quickly masked it with more indignation. "You? The owner?" she repeated, her tone dripping with disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me." The atmosphere in the cafe grew heavier, the collective discomfort now tinged with anticipation. Everyone seemed to sense that the situation was nearing a breaking point. Margaret, flustered and fuming, grabbed her handbag and prepared to storm out. Her heels clicked loudly against the tiled floor as she turned toward the door, muttering about the terrible service. The atmosphere in the cafe was thick with tension, customers and staff alike unsure how to react to the unfolding scene. Before she could leave, James took a step forward, his expression calm and unflinching. His voice carried through the cafe, steady but firm. "Ma'am, before you go, I'd like to introduce myself properly." Margaret paused, glancing back at him, her irritation clear. "I don't see what that has to do with anything," she snapped. James met her gaze, his composure unwavering. "It has everything to do with it. My name is James, and I'm the owner of this cafe. I started it years ago with nothing but a small savings and a dream." The cafe fell silent again, all eyes fixed on James as his words began to resonate. He continued, his tone warm yet resolute. "I've worked hard to create a space where everyone feels welcome, no matter who they are or where they come from. It wasn't easy. I've faced obstacles and, yes, prejudices, sometimes subtle, sometimes blatant, just like this." Margaret's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. She shifted uncomfortably but said nothing, allowing James to continue. "I've faced moments where people assumed I didn't belong in my own business. They judged me before knowing who I was or what I stood for. But that's exactly why I'm here, to challenge those assumptions and prove that respect and kindness matter more than anything else." His words hung in the air, a quiet strength in his tone that demanded attention. Margaret's bravado faltered as she looked around the room, noticing the nods of support from other customers and the admiring expressions of the staff. Her cheeks flushed as she realized the weight of her mistake. James ended with a gentle but powerful remark. "You're welcome here, just like everyone else. But respect goes both ways. That's the heart of this cafe and the heart of any good community." Margaret opened her mouth to respond, but found herself speechless. Her confidence, once so strong, had evaporated in the face of James's unwavering dignity. She stood frozen, realizing she had judged him unfairly. And now everyone knew it. Margaret's face froze in a mixture of shock and disbelief, her confident demeanor shattered by James's calm revelation. Her eyes darted around the cafe, taking in the reactions of those around her. Conversations had resumed in hushed tones, but their focus was unmistakable. Customers whispered to one another, shaking their heads or nodding in silent agreement with James's words. A few shot-pointed glances her way, their disapproval thinly veiled. The murmur of support for James grew louder, punctuated by subtle gestures of encouragement. A young man near the counter gave a small clap, quickly joined by another customer. "Well said," someone murmured from a nearby table. The staff, who had stood silently during the confrontation, exchanged proud glances and nodded toward James. Their respect for him was evident, and it only amplified Margaret's isolation. Margaret's carefully curated world, one where she always felt in control, seemed to crumble around her. She looked back at James, as if seeing him for the first time, her indignation replaced by uncertainty. The truth of her behavior weighed heavily on her, and the realization of her mistake washed over her like a cold wave. For a moment, she tried to muster a response, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she glanced down, avoiding the judgmental stares of those around her. The silence between her and James felt almost unbearable, but James didn't press further. His calm demeanor, even in the face of her prejudice, had spoken louder than any argument could. The pause stretched, and Margaret shifted uncomfortably, clutching her handbag tighter. She looked once more at James, her lips parting as if to apologize, but the words caught in her throat. With nothing else to do, she stood frozen, realizing that her assumptions had not only been wrong, but had exposed her own flaws to everyone in the room. James took a moment to glance around the cafe, making eye contact with the staff and customers who were still quietly observing the tense exchange. The silence had grown heavy, and he knew it was an opportunity to turn an uncomfortable moment into a meaningful lesson, not just for Margaret, but for everyone present. He stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. "Moments like this remind me why I started this cafe," he began, addressing the room. "It's not just a business. It's a place where people come together. Different people, from different backgrounds with different stories. That's what makes this community strong. But respect and understanding? They're what hold us together." He turned his gaze back to Margaret, his expression softening slightly. "Ma'am, I understand that we all carry our own experiences and assumptions. I don't blame you for having yours, but I do hope that after today you'll consider how those assumptions can affect others. Respect doesn't cost anything, but it can mean everything." The room remained silent, his words resonating with those present. A few customers nodded in agreement, and one whispered, "That's powerful," to a companion. Margaret faltered, her confident facade now fully dismantled. She avoided James's gaze, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I didn't mean," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. She swallowed hard, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I'm sorry if I offended you," she managed, though her tone was hesitant and uncertain. James nodded, his expression kind but firm. "I appreciate your apology," he replied, "but this isn't about me. It's about all of us learning to treat each other with dignity, no matter what. That's how we build a better world. Margaret looked around, noticing the supportive expressions on the faces of the other customers and staff. The weight of their silent judgment pressed on her, but so did the unexpected warmth in James's words. She shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "I'll think about what you said." James gave her a small smile, signaling that he wasn't holding a grudge. "That's all I ask." As Margaret slowly turned and left the cafe, the tension began to dissolve. Conversations resumed, and the room felt lighter. James returned to the counter, resuming his work as if nothing had happened. But the atmosphere in the cafe had shifted. Everyone present carried a little more awareness of how small actions and words could make a big difference in the lives of others. A week had passed since the incident, and the cafe hummed with its usual energy. The comforting aroma of coffee and freshly baked goods mingled with the soft sounds of conversation and the rhythmic clatter of cups. For James and his staff, life had returned to its steady rhythm, though the memory of the confrontation lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. Mid-morning, the familiar chime of the cafe door drew James's attention. He looked up from the counter and was surprised to see Margaret step inside. Gone was the commanding air she had carried before. This time, she walked in with her shoulders slightly hunched, her gaze softer and more reserved. She paused by the door, scanning the room, before stepping quietly into the line. The staff noticed her, too, exchanging subtle glances. Unlike last time, Margaret didn't push to the front or make her presence known. Instead, she waited her turn, observing the cafe's flow with a thoughtful expression. She glanced toward James, catching his eye briefly before looking away. When her turn came, she stepped forward, clutching her bag with both hands. James greeted her with his usual polite smile, his voice calm and welcoming. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" Margaret hesitated, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Good morning," she replied, her tone subdued. She took a breath and looked him in the eye. "Before I order, I want to say, I'm sorry for how I behaved last week. It was wrong of me, and I've been thinking about it ever since." The cafe quieted slightly, as if everyone was straining to hear. James nodded, his expression warm but measured. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "I appreciate it." Margaret's lips twitched into a faint, nervous smile. "I judged you unfairly, and I realize now how hurtful that must have been. You didn't deserve it, and I hope you'll let me make it up to you." James's smile widened, genuine and kind. "Acknowledging it is more than enough. Thank you for taking the time to come back." Margaret relaxed slightly and placed her order. This time, she accepted her coffee with a quiet, "Thank you," lingering by the counter as if unsure whether to leave or say more. As she walked out, the cafe felt different. The moment wasn't just about reconciliation. It was a small victory for change, a testament to the power of grace and humility. Customers who had witnessed the scene exchanged quiet smiles, and the atmosphere of the cafe felt warmer than ever. The cafe's doors had witnessed countless stories, some joyful, some mundane, and some transformative. The encounter between Margaret and James was one of those rare moments that left an indelible mark on everyone present. It wasn't just a clash of personalities or a moment of public embarrassment. It was a lesson about the assumptions we make and the walls we build based on appearances, stereotypes, and unfounded biases. Margaret's journey, from entitlement and prejudice to reflection and humility, was a reminder of the power of change. It took only one moment, one courageous, dignified response from James to shift the course of her thinking. That single interaction challenged years of ingrained prejudice and opened the door to growth. It wasn't just about Margaret. It was about everyone in that cafe who witnessed the exchange and walked away with a deeper understanding of the value of respect and humanity. James's calm and composed approach to handling the situation highlighted the strength that comes from staying true to one's values. His ability to turn an ugly confrontation into a moment of reflection for the entire room demonstrated the quiet power of grace under pressure. He didn't just protect his dignity, he protected the essence of his cafe, a place where everyone was welcome, regardless of who they were or where they came from. Margaret's return, subdued and thoughtful, was proof that even the most resistant minds could change when faced with undeniable truth and kindness. Her willingness to apologize and seek amends showed that transformation is possible no matter how late it arrives. This story is a powerful reminder to us all. Judging people based on appearances or stereotypes diminishes not only them, but also us. It blinds us to their potential, their humanity, and the unique stories they carry. Sometimes it takes a single moment, a moment of courage, of truth, of connection, to alter years of prejudice. What happened in that cafe wasn't just a personal victory for James or a humbling moment for Margaret. It was a small but significant step toward building a kinder, more understanding community. Now, we ask you, what would you have done if you were there? Would you have stood silently, or would you have spoken up? Share your thoughts, and let's continue this important conversation. Change starts with each of us. Let's make it count.